From KAMR Local 4 News, your local election headquarters, this is Politics Today.
Well, the March primaries will be here before you know it. There are some changes that you need to know about before a critical deadline. And candidates from the GOP and Democratic side make a few stops in Amarillo. We'll hear from them coming up. With the Texas primary election coming up on March 3rd, there's some important changes you need to know before you vote. Thanks for joining us this morning. Politics Today's Jack Kessler has more from the Randall County Elections Administrator on what you need to know before you vote.
Randall County Elections Administrator Shannon Lackey says they're getting a lot of phone calls from voters whose voter certificates expired at the end of last year. But she says this year, because of redistricting plus a new statewide voter registration system, those voter certificates haven't been sent out.
It's very, very important for voters to know. Just because your certificate expires does not mean your voter registration did. If you are currently registered, you haven't moved, there's no updates or changes to your voter registration that need to be made, there's nothing further you need to do.
Lackey's concern is that this is going to keep voters from actually going and voting because they think they are not eligible.
And that is absolutely not the truth. They can still vote, and we want them to turn out and vote. It will not keep you from voting. A voter can either bring their old card with them to the polling place or simply just bring your photo ID, and you're still going to be allowed to vote.
Another key change, the United States Postal Service is no longer issuing a date of postmark at every local post office. It will be postmarked at a regional post office.
This is going to be a big deal. Anyone can walk into their local post office and ask for them to do a hand postmark instead of just allowing it to go through the system. Because nothing gets a postmark now until it goes to a regional station, and that's where it's postmarked.
If you need to make a change or update your voter registration, you can no longer just drop it in the mail on February 2nd and think it's going to get postmarked in time. So the best way to do that is, as soon as possible, head over to the mailbox. By the way, that February 2nd deadline is something you need to mark on your calendar. She also suggests that those who do mail-in voting also have to have those sent off as early as possible. It's not worth it risking not getting there. 5,000 Tyson food workers lost their jobs this week. More than 1,500 of those are from the plant here in Amarillo. Democratic political candidate stopped by on Tuesday to show their support. More than one, in fact. One of those candidates was Mark Nair. He's a former city council member who is running uncontested in his race for District 13 on the Democratic ticket. He spoke about how their job loss will impact them as they walk into an era of uncertainty in the U.S. due to his opinion, the Trump administration. He wasn't alone, in that campaign speech. We're going to hear from another candidate who is also out there to support Tyson workers and make her case for your vote. Making food and farming affordable again. That is the slogan for Clayton Tucker, who is running on the Democratic ticket for Texas Ag Commissioner. He was one of many candidates who stopped by Amarillo and the Tyson plant on Tuesday.
A lot of folks got together to talk about what's going on in American agriculture. You know, Tyson's having to shut down a lot of facilities, they're to lay off folks, and that's just because there's not enough agriculture. You know, when NAFTA was passed, what folks don't really know, it didn't just offshore manufacturing, it offshored a lot of our agriculture. And what we're seeing is a continuation of that. So what I'm running to do is to bring back agriculture, to reshore agriculture, and to make sure that we have the cattle, that we have the farms, to keep facilities like this up and running and workers employed.
And why did you feel it was important, or why did you feel it was important for you to be out here this morning with the people who are speaking as well?
Look, I'm a cattle rancher from Lampasas, so I'm a part of this industry. I'm a part of the supply chain. So when they are suffering, that's bad for my family farm, that's bad for everyone else, because we're all really in this together. When any part of the system is sick, it really affects everyone else. So we're here in solidarity with the workers and with every other farmer who's suffering right now.
And what practical steps do you think need to be taken to prevent things like this kind of layoffs from happening again?
Well, what I want to see, and this is something that I will be fighting for as Texas Agriculture Commissioner. So the Ag Commissioner oversees supply chains for local schools, like where food goes there. Might not determine the recipes, but where that food comes from. I would want to have the rule that any Texas school, whatever food is served there, has to come from Texas farmers, Texas ranchers, and processed by Texans as well. So Texas is a net importer of food. We actually import more of our food, and now Brazil's overtaken us even with beef. So I want to make it where our Texas cattle ranchers and workers at this plant and other plants like it are the ones who make the food and raise the food for our public school kids.
And I guess, what was it like being here this morning and like seeing people who were both local and on the national level talk about Amarillo issues specifically?
I'm a hill country kid, I'm a West Texan at heart. So it was really encouraging to see folks pay more attention to the Panhandle, pay more attention to Amarillo, because this has been forgotten country. A lot of our politicians, a lot of our leaders have just overlooked Amarillo. They've taken advantage of Amarillo. They just kind of, it's flyover country for way too many folks. And we're very encouraged to see that, the Democratic Party, all these officials have showed up, including some pretty higher ups from folks who really worked to really protect working folks. So this is an encouraging sign, but it's just a down payment. A lot more is to come.
Were you able to talk with Jasmine Crockett about anything?
I've known Jasmine Crockett for a number of years. I did a lot on her very first campaign when she ran for Texas State House. So her and I talk every now and then. When she was serving as agriculture, or when she was serving on the Agriculture Committee in Congress, we did have several conversations.
Is there anything that I am forgetting or leaving out, or anything you'd like to add?
Another thing that I'm really concerned about, though it wasn't talked too much today, is these data centers coming in. They use a lot of power, they use a lot of water. Where they go, water bills and power bills go up, or wells just run dry. And I'm very, very concerned about what that's going to do to agriculture here. I mean, we're building 16 San Franciscos right next to Amarillo. Abilene is getting a Seattle. Midland, Odessa is getting another couple cities of Austins. This is just not sustainable. I think it's a really bad idea. As Ag Commissioner, I'll be issuing ag impact studies to put a pause on all of them until we can guarantee they will not take our water. I'm used to that. They will not take our water, they will not take our power, and that they will truly serve the community. So we're also very concerned about these data centers.
Well, Tucker is the only candidate on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, it's current Ag Commissioner Sid Miller versus Nate Sheets. Earlier this week, Sheets was endorsed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. We've got more politics today coming up after this. More and more political candidates are making stops in Amarillo and the surrounding areas. Earlier this week, one of those candidates who is in town was U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett.
And I proudly stand before you today with complaints. My complaints have to do with the inaction, or maybe it was the intentional actions of this rogue administration and, yes, the Republicans that are flanking it. You see, a lot of people want us to fight one another instead of getting us to unite, and they want us to ignore the fact that poor policies have led to the pain of the people. Let me go a little bit further. Many of you may know me from a meme or a viral moment. Many of you have no idea that I actually served on the Agriculture Committee. I served on the Ag Committee, and I fought really hard to make sure that we could get a farm bill passed. Right now, we are 3 years behind on a 5-year farm bill. Let me tell you what that means. It means that I was going around, I was talking to Texas ranchers and farmers and hearing directly from them the pain that they were experiencing. Some of the things that people just don't know, and frankly, now they are just now waking up to, is the fact that, as it's already been said, we are at a 75-year low as it relates to cattle production. Now, what exactly does this mean for all of us? Well, let me explain to you partially how we got here. One of the reasons is that we know, well, first of all, cattle stock is at a record low because Republican-led farm bills over the last several decades have ignored the needs of beef cattle ranchers. as they have faced increasingly severe droughts and increased input costs. For your awareness, the subsidies tend to go first to the big row crops, then dairy cows, then a tiny bit to beef cows. If we start talking about what the president has done as it relates to tariffs, well, that only precluded and prevented us from, well, having the exports that we needed. He then went a step further and decided that it only made sense to send $40 billion to Argentina. Now imagine this. This $40 billion didn't come from his own bank account. This $40 billion came from the very taxpayers that now are not going to have jobs right here in Amarillo. So somebody tell me how it makes sense to send money to a foreign country that is only deciding that they are going to compete with our ranchers. You're putting, while cutting ACA subsidies and so many other things. I'm just here to tell you that I am tired of this right versus left rhetoric. This is about right versus wrong. Like, I need people to take just one moment and think for a second. Forget the fact that you like a R. Forget the fact that you think red is the best color.
That's right.
Focus on what is happening here.
Right. That's right.
It doesn't matter if you don't work at Tyson. If you live in this community, you should care.
That's right.
Because when Tyson workers are out of work, what does that mean for everybody else? It means the entire economy is going to struggle. Listen, I lived in East Texas. I know what it is to live in rural Texas, and I understand the threats that come when the tire plant may shut down. And in fact, we have a chicken Tyson's plant very near where I used to live. I lived in Texarkana. We had one right there in Mount Pleasant. Trust me, I know this life. I know that this community should be surrounding every single Tyson worker in this moment. And again, while I know that we still have our fair share of issues that we need to deal with as it relates to worker safety, Lord knows I worked on some things specifically around meat packing plants when I was on the agriculture committee, and some of the safety concerns that we have, as well as the pay. But right now, the biggest issue that we have is that we have a federal government that has decided that it doesn't want to work for the American people. It is time to elect people that have the courage to just represent the 30 million people that actually live in Texas, instead of bending the knee to a rogue president that only cares about his rich friends, whether they are Americans or otherwise. So I'm here because it matters. I know a lot of people see politicians pop up and do things because it's out of convenience. As I go through this U.S. Senate race, I am here to educate you on the work that didn't go viral, the work that I did do with farmers and ranchers as I served on the Agriculture Committee. It is time for us to come together in a unified way. I just ask that we all stand with the Tyson workers, and frankly, all of our farmers and ranchers who are currently filing bankruptcy at a record rate and experiencing a record rate of suicide. It is time for us to stand together, y'all.
That's right.
Because united we stand, divided we fall.
Crockett is on the ballot with Texas Representative James Tallarico. They both participated in a debate Saturday afternoon. You can see that over on our website. Now, on the other side of that ticket is current Attorney General Ken Paxton and incumbent Senator John Cornyn, as well as Representative Wesley Hunt. We'll hear from him coming up next. Without a doubt, one of the biggest political races in Texas, especially on the GOP side, is the race between Senator John Cornyn and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. There's another candidate who is looking to stand out as well and get ahead of the pack. Representative Wesley Hunt stopped at the Big Texan this past Monday.
All right, so first question is, both Senator John Cornyn and Ken Paxton are career politicians, and you're fairly new to politics, after 2023. So I guess what makes you, be a Texas senator? Again, they're career politicians, qualified.
Thank you for asking that. I think the American public is sick of career politicians. The United States Senate, as I have said repeatedly, is not a retirement community. It is time for the next generation to step in and get in this fight. In 24 years, serving as a senator is enough. In fact, I'm in my early 40s, and I'm somebody that's already committed to doing 2 terms, 12 years when I am your next senator, and it's time to get out of the way at that point and let somebody else do this job, because our founding fathers did not want career politicians. I am a combat veteran. I'm a West Point grad. I'm a former Apache pilot, flew 55 combat air missions in Baghdad. My brother, sister, and I all went to West Point. My dad's a retired colonel. There's 60 years worth of military service in my family. Service runs in my family, but the one thing that I also learned is that continuous service is important, but it's also time to move on, let the next generation step into the fight, and that goes for the military, and it certainly goes for the United States Senate, and that's what makes me different.
And so, yeah, so for people who are trying to see the difference between you and Senator Cornyn, I guess what are those big differences that you guys have?
Well, there's a lot of differences, as you could probably imagine. First of all, I will never co-author gun control legislation in the great state of Texas. The problem when you're around for 24 years is that you stop coming to Texas, you become a part of the swamp, and you forget what really matters to Texans, like red flag laws are a big no-no, especially amongst the primary voters. So one of my first order of businesses will be to revoke his legislation for red flag laws. Another thing is this: I was the first person in the country to endorse President Trump. He came around a year later when it was convenient. He was never America first. President Trump then comes to Texas, wins by over 15 points, and then now all of a sudden he wants to put on his MAGA hat. Well, it's too late, because I was there from day one. And then lastly, I will tell you this: he called the border wall arcane and said it was stupid and not necessary, and walls don't work. Yes, they do. And as somebody that understands that the number one role of the federal government is to keep our citizens safe, I'm somebody that put my life on the line before in combat. I am doing it again to serve in the halls of Congress. Yes, walls do work, and it's up to us in the Senate to codify President Trump's executive orders, and he did it by fixing the border, and now we have to get off our behinds and codify it for the future.
Yeah, you talked about that a lot, just the importance of codifying a lot of President Trump's stuff, because he's like, you can do it with an executive order, but it's important to codify this stuff. How important is it for the Senate to codify these executive orders or these things that President Trump wants?
Well, it's critical, because clearly President Trump wants this. The American people want it. He won every single swing state. He won the Electoral College vote. He won the popular vote. He clearly won Texas by 15 points. This is what the American people, especially Texans, want to see. We need to nuke the filibuster, and we need to nuke it now, because at some point Democrats are going to be back in charge, and they're going to do it. We need to do it now so we can get President Trump's agenda through. That's what the American people want. And people like Cornyn and people like Tillis and people like Collins, they're not going to do it. And that's why President Trump hasn't endorsed them either, because what we realize is that, again, it's time for the next tier of America First Patriot to get in and do the will of the American people, which they made very clear last November.
And if you get the nomination, which Democratic nominee would you want to see or go against you, either Jasmine Crockett or James Calrissian?
It doesn't matter. I will outperform Ken and John already in the general election. All the data shows that. But if I had my druthers, I could not imagine a nice, strong debate about this country against Jasmine Crockett. Can you imagine a race and the ideological differences of that Democrat candidate versus me, a freedom fighter that believes in the progress of this country, willing to die for this country, and understanding this is the greatest country in the world, and me and my family and many other Americans are a product of that. Imagine standing on stage next to somebody who's a victim and just opposed to somebody like me who is a victor.
And then I want to ask you a question real quick. As somebody who served, talk to me a little bit about your feelings when it comes to some of the actions that we saw in Venezuela, and then the talks around Greenland.
What we have seen in Venezuela and what we saw in the Iran strike by President Trump almost a year ago is nothing short of brilliance. This is the definition of peace through strength. I remember liberals and Democrats clamoring and wondering, well, if we strike Iran, we're going to be in World War III. Last I checked, I haven't seen brigades deployed like I saw when I was in endless wars. But I fought in these endless wars. We get Maduro, they're going to say we're starting World War III. Last I checked, we're not starting World War III at all. In fact, now we are respected. And that's the definition of peace through strength. This is exactly what President Trump ran on. We're going to be a strong country. We're going to be a fit country. We don't need DEI. We're going to be technologically advanced, but also people are not going to want to mess with us.
Representative Hunt is running against current Attorney General Ken Paxton and incumbent Senator John Cornyn. Last numbers showed that Paxton and Cornyn nearly tied. Experts think that will head to a runoff. Hunt is only about 10 points behind the two with a little less than 6 weeks to go. And as those other candidates make the swing into our area, we'll be interviewing them as well. We'll wrap up politics today after this. You can always stay up on the latest political news with us this week. We have continuing coverage on our website, myhighplains.com. Plus, you can check us out on your favorite app. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.